I'm going, good evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order with a moment of silence and a salute to the flag, and I'd like to dedicate this moment of silence to Holocaust Remembrance Day.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Superintendent, can you call the roll, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Dr. Phillips?
Here.
Ms. Krepshin?
Here.
President McLaughlin? Mayor Curtatone? Mr. Green?
Here.
Ms. Barish?
Here.
Ms. Patone?
Here.
Dr. Ackman?
Present.
Ms. Norman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We are going to jump right in to item number 2, the report of student representatives. Natalia?
Good evening. Today I would like to report a couple things. First, we have midterms, which took place January 15th through the 17th. Most students were on edge. Students complained about how they had to study a lot and it kind of just piled up the stress. So I've heard a lot of complaints through the student body. So luckily it's over. Next we have the MLK ceremony that took place at the East Somerville, where the music department performed and students read original written pieces. It was a great ceremony from what I've heard. And the boys varsity basketball team had an amazing opportunity to play at the TD Garden this weekend. There was a great turnout. It was amazing, but unfortunately we lost 59-60, but it was so close, but it was amazing. And student representatives, class officers, we're just having a few issues with fundraising and getting the student body amped for any event, and it's really hard to get fundraising when students don't want to participate. So that's just a little adversity we're coming up with, but thank you.
Thank you for that report. Are there questions? Ms. Krepchin?
Thank you for that report. I just had a question about you talking about students feeling very stressed about midterms, and I was just curious if you or any of the other students you talked to had ideas about how we could make it less stressful.
Many students, they talked about how not every class should have a midterm or having more time to prepare in class than rather just teachers just throwing a study guide online and then saying doing it on your own. It's more like we could have a little review in class or have an opportunity to be able to get back points, because it is 25% of your grade, which can significantly drop it if you aren't doing very well in a class. So students just want to be able to bring back their grades up before the quarter ends. So that's just something they've told me.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Relatedly, I was curious to know if the feeling was that this year was, say, more stressful than prior years, or is it the standard midterms are too stressful?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is the sense that this year's midterms were, say, more stressful than last year's midterms, or is this, I don't want to say normal, but typical midterm stress?
Well, personally, I felt it was more difficult last year, perhaps because I was a freshman and they took it easy on us, but this year is significantly more difficult for me. I felt like I had to pile on more work, and that was felt throughout my class. So I feel like it gets harder as you get older, I guess.
Yeah. Superintendent, would you like to speak to that?
Through you, Madam Chair. I think it would be a great conversation for us to initiate with the students to think about what could be some stress releases during that period. It could be, do we do some mindfulness or some yoga, or just be able to have some different breaks in terms of the schedule. So I'm glad you brought it up, because I'll definitely bring it up with the principal and just see what steps we might be able to take going forward, so that with finals, it's not that same area. I do also want to say that this is an area that Somerville High School is beginning to lead the way. For instance, last year in the finals, rather than doing some finals the traditional way, they actually substituted in projects, which allowed students to be able to sort of break up what they would be taking tests on versus what they could plan for on a longer period of time. So my hope is that we continue to do more of that at Somerville High School so that it doesn't all come down to just one test. But I will definitely take your comments back and have a conversation with Mr. Lagambina, so thank you.
Are there any other questions for our student rep? Thank you so much, and I just want to say, Natalia always impresses me. She's already been to school, been to work, gone to the library, finished her homework, and has shown up here tonight. So you continue to impress, and thank you so much for your time. Have a good, and you should scooch home right now and feel better, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. There is no public comment. I am going to take an item out of order because we have guest presenters, and we're going to jump down to new business to the Youth Risk Behavior Survey update, which was in our packets. And also, there's a PowerPoint. Yes. Superintendent, did you want to introduce this topic at all?
Through you, Madam Chair. This is with a collaboration with the Health and Human Services Department. Matt Mitchell is going to be presenting to us tonight. We really appreciate all of the collaboration and the work. This is a chance for us to get insight into what our students are thinking and doing and asking for. And I think certainly over the course of my 5 years, we've learned a great deal and seen some changes that it's allowed us to plan better in terms of the types of services and supports that we provide to students. I've also asked Director Liz Doncaster, who's our student support director, to be here as well, as I thought that the committee may have some questions about some of the types of interventions and supports that we're providing. So, Matt?
There you go.
Good evening, through you, Madam Chair. Doug Kress, the HHS director, would like to have been here tonight, but he is currently on a cruise down in Florida. So, I guess that's not bad, right? So typically he would do this in conjunction with me, but I'll give you guys a pretty good, quick, brief overview of some of the results from this past year, and then I'll make a shameless plug for our event on Thursday night. It is our trivia event that will go a little bit more in depth into some of this stuff for community members, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. So as the superintendent said, the Somerville Office of Prevention and the Health Department, the Public Schools and Police Department and Cambridge Health Alliance collaborate with our evaluator, Social Science Research and Evaluation, to put this together each year. It's administered as a questionnaire, and this year it was in March of 2019, to all public school students, grades 6 through 8. So we administer it in 4 different languages: English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian. This year we had the total number of respondents around 886, which actually represented about 92% of the middle school population, which was one of the higher amounts of participation rates that we've had recently. So you can see that the survey asks about background characteristics such as gender, age, and grade level, student substance-related stuff, as well as related perceptions, and other issues such as violence, mental health, physical activity, and dietary behavior. A lot of people ask about the validity of the survey, so research indicates that students' responses to such surveys are reasonably accurate, provided that the survey is voluntarily and confidential. This survey met all of those conditions. So I don't have to read through all of this, and I can get right into the data, but if anyone has any other questions, you can ask it at the end as well. So we're going to start with substance use. Here it shows the lifetime substance use for Somerville Middle School students by grade. So overall, the percentage of 2019 Somerville Middle School students reported ever using substances increased with age and grade. For example, the percentage who reported ever using electronic vapor products in their lifetime increased from 7% in 6th grade to 11% in 7th grade to about 20% in 8th grade. Now, lifetime use just indicates ever using the product, not which another metric we have is 30 days. So if they're using it in the last 30 days, which I believe is going to be on the next slide. Overall, current substance use was similar among Somerville Middle School students, male and females. Alcohol was both about 4% for males and females. Binge drinking was about 1% for males and females. Binge alcohol 5+ drinks was about 0% for both genders. Cigarettes was about 0.5% for males, 2% females, and so on and so on. So use continues to be fairly low in the middle school, but you can see, especially with electronic cigarettes or electronic vapor products, they're kind of leading the way right now in conjunction with alcohol, which I think tends to get overshadowed a little bit by the recent stuff going on with electronic vapor products. This slide shows the current substance use for Somerville Middle students by grade. So overall, the percentage of Somerville Middle students who reported current use of more common substances such as alcohol, tobacco, nicotine, and marijuana increased slightly with age and grade. For example, the percentage of students who reported current alcohol use increased from 2% in 6th grade to 5% in 7th grade to 5% in 8th grade. With similar trends for electronic vapor products, where it goes from 1 to 3 to 4, and marijuana are at 0.6, 4, and 3. So use of rates for all other substances remain comparatively low across all grades. This slide here shows the current substance use for national 8th grade students and Somerville 8th grade students. So Somerville 8th grade student current use rates for comparable substances were generally at or below national averages. Alcohol with 8 to 5, cigarettes 2 to 1, electronic vapor products 10 to 4, marijuana 6 to 3, and inhalants 2 to 2. So use rates for less commonly used substances were similarly low among both populations. Particularly, as you can see, the electronic vapor products in Massachusetts, or nationally, I'm sorry, is around 10%, which is not surprising given the landscape of some of the things that's been going on with electronic vapor products. Current substance use for Somerville Middle School students. So the available trend data reveals consistency in current use from 2017 to 2018, with levels remaining historically low. Since 2009, the rate of current alcohol use has declined from 9% to 4%, binge drinking from 2% to virtually 0%, cigarette use from 5 to 1, marijuana use from 6 to 3, and inhalants from 3 to 1. An exception, though, is the use of electronic vapor products, which increased 1% in 2017 to 3% in 2019. Issues related to substance use. So this kind of gets at some more qualitative opinions on the risk or the perceived risk of substance use. So respondents were asked to answer the following questions about the use of these substances and how much they felt there was risk of people harming themselves physically or in other ways if they use the products. So here you see the displayed are the percentages of respondents who answered moderate or great risk. The question concerning use of electronic vapor products was added to the survey in 2019, and the question concerning medical use of prescription drugs was added in 2017. Overall, the largest percentage of respondents perceive use of illegal drugs other than marijuana as moderate or great risk, around 89% in 2019, followed by non-medical use of prescription drugs, 85%, smoking 1 or more packs of cigarettes a day, 81%, smoking marijuana regularly, 77%, using electronic vapor products, 72%, and taking 1 to 2 drinks of alcohol nearly every day at 63%. So as you can see, the overall, the top 3 that individuals are reporting as less risky or not as risky as the other products, in order goes alcohol at 1, electronic vapor products at 2, and marijuana at 3. Here, students were asked to answer the following question about how their parents would view their use of cigarettes, electronic vapor products, and other substances, and how wrong do they feel like their parents, or how wrong do your parents feel it would be for you to, and these are each of the responses. Overall, most respondents felt that their parents would not approve of their substance use. The largest percentage of respondents perceived parental disapproval of their use of illegal drugs other than marijuana as the highest at 98%, followed closely by non-medical use of prescription drugs at 97%, smoking cigarettes and smoking marijuana at 96%, using electronic vapor products at 94, and drinking alcohol regularly at 93. So again, the lowest 3 of perceived disapproval are the same 3 products from the last one in terms of perception of risk, which include drinking alcohol regularly, using electronic vapor products, and smoking marijuana. Perceived parental disapproval of substance use has shown very little historical change over time. Here, it shows the percent of Somerville Middle School students who received instruction in school and talked with their family adults about substance use. So Somerville Middle School students were asked if they had ever used or had ever received instruction in school and or talked to their parents about their use. In 2019, respondents were more likely to report receiving instruction in school about both issues than they were to have spoken to their parents or family adults about it. The risks of smoking and other tobacco use, 82% in school versus 57% with a parent or family member. The risks involved with drug use, 72% in school and 55% with parents and family and adults. So while the communication with parents and other family adults about the risk of substance use has remained relatively consistent and relatively low, in my opinion, the percentage of students who reported receiving instruction in school has increased notably since 2015. Received instruction in school on the risks of smoking has gone from 50% in 2015 to 82% in 2019, and then received instruction on the risks involved with drug use to 52% to 72% in 2009. So there are some things that we're trying to do too at the city level that I can talk about a little bit about reaching parents and trying to equip them with more skills so that they feel more comfortable to talk to their youth and their caregivers, and that's another shameless plug for some of the work I'll be doing. But more to come on that. All right, so that's really my expertise, but I will get into this other part since Doug's vacationing on his cruise, wherever he may be. So the first one here is the percent of Somerville Middle School students who experience physical violence issues in the past 12 months. So trends, the available trend data reveals slight increases in 2019 in reported physical issues of physical fighting and family violence after prior declines since 2009. Physical fighting on school property, 5% 2017, 8% in 2019. Physical fighting off school property, 5% to 7%. Being beaten or physically hurt by a family member, 4 to 3%, and so on. And for genders, in 2019, male middle school students were more likely than females to report physical fighting. Physical fighting on school property, 12 to 4, male to female. Physical fighting off school, 10 to 3, and so on. Grade, reported experiences with violence and or threats among 2019 Somerville Middle School students varied only slightly with age and grade, with the most notable difference being the decline in physical fighting at school from 6th to 8th grade. Here I talk about the percent of Somerville Middle students who experience bullying issues in the past 12 months. So, as observed in prior years, 2019 middle school students were more likely to report being bullied when they were in or on the way to school than they were not in or on the way to school. 9% reported that they were bullied electronically through texting, email, or social media like Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram in the past 12 months, and 23% saw someone else bullied in or at school. Trend data reveals a reversal in 2019 of prior decreases in reports of these issues. Bullying to/from school. Bullied in or on the way to school, 9% in 2017, 12% in 2019. Bullied when not in or on the way to school, stayed even at 5%. Electronically went up from 8% to 9%, and someone saw someone else bullied in or on their way to school from 18% to 23%. Gender, 2019 Somerville female middle school students were more likely than males to report each of these bullying experiences. And then for grade, reported experiences with bullying among 2000 middle school students decreased overall with age and grade. So 6th to 8th grade data is as follows: bullied in or to school, 15, 14, 5, and so on. So you can see the overall trends there in the data. This slide talks about the response to last time, bullied into or from school in the past 12 months. So respondents who reported that they had been bullied in school and or on their way to school in the past 12 months were asked how they responded the last time it had happened, with multiple responses being possible. Beyond not doing anything at 40%, 2019 respondents were more likely to report telling a friend or another student and or a parent or guardian about it, 65% respectively, followed by trying to get the person to stop doing it at 64%, and telling a school adult at 56%. Trend data has varied with, doing nothing at 39 to 40, tried to get the person to stop doing it from 62 to 64 and so on. So, gender, males were more likely than females to report each response. And for grade, there were a few consistent differences by age or grade in the 2019 responses. Mental health is the next section. So the percent of Somerville Middle School students who reported experiencing potential stressors in the past 12 months. In 2019, approximately 1 out of every 3 Somerville Middle School students had a family member or a close friend die at 34%, and or had a failing report card, 28% in the 12 months prior to the survey. Roughly 1 out of 10 had moved with their family at 15%, experienced a divorce or separation in their family at 12%, and or had a family member with an alcohol or drug problem at 11%. Less than 1 in 10 had witnessed violence in their family, 5%, and so on and so on. Trends, notable increasing trends include an increase since 2013 in the percentage of students who were reported having a family member or close friend die. This went from 28% in 2013 to 34% in 2019, and an increase between 2017 and 2019 in the percentage reporting that a family member had an alcohol or drug problem after prior decreases previous to that. Gender, differences by gender and reports of these issues varied by item. Had a family member close to them, 31 males, 36% females, and so on. And on the whole, most of the experiences varied only slightly with age and grade. This slide shows the percentage of Somerville Middle School students who reported worrying about problems in the past 12 months. Trends, the issue that largest percentage of Somerville Middle School students reported worry about in 2019 was school failure or poor grades. 44% reported worrying about this in the 12 months prior to the survey, followed closely by their weight. Approximately 1/5 reported worrying about physical health problems, 23%, and being bullied at 19%. As displayed in the chart, concern about each issue increased in 2019, most notably the concern about school failure or poor grades. With the exception of physical fighting, overall concern about personal issues was more prevalent among Somerville Middle School students, females, in 2019. And notable in the percentage of students in grades 6 through 8 who reported worrying about these issues is the increase with age and grade and concern about school failure, poor grades, and weight. So there's a lot to chew on there, but I'll leave it be for the time being. Self-harm and suicidal ideation and behavior in the past 12 months. So 11% of 2019 Somerville middle school students reported that they hurt themselves on purpose in the 12 months prior to the survey, while 13% seriously considered suicide and 3% actually attempted suicide in that time. Trends, reports of these issues increased in 2019. In 2019, Somerville Middle School females were more likely than males to have hurt themselves on purpose, seriously considered suicide, and actually attempted suicide in the 12 months prior to the survey. And rates of each of these issues varied with age and grade. Physical health. So the percentage of Somerville Middle School students who have ever had sexual intercourse, 3% of 2019 Somerville Middle School students reported ever having sexual intercourse. The overall percentage of Somerville Middle School students who reported remained unchanged in 2019 and at the lowest level observed since 2009. Middle school males, 4% were slightly more likely than females to report. And as displayed in the chart, the percentage of 2019 Somerville Middle School students who reported ever having sexual intercourse increased from 1% in 6th grade to 4% in 7th grade and 5% in 8th grade. Current weight control goal among Somerville Middle School students. So 11% of middle school students reported that they were trying to gain weight, 41% said that they were trying to stay at the same weight, and 48% said that they were trying to lose weight. The percentage of these students who reported that they were trying to lose weight has remained largely consistent since 2009. Female students were more likely to report trying to lose weight, while males were more likely to report trying to gain weight. Reported weight control efforts varied only slightly with age and grade, with a notable increase in the percentage of 8th graders reporting that they were trying to lose weight. Gain weight was 10, 12, 10. Stay the same weight, 45, 43, 34, and 45, 45, 56 for losing weight. This is our last slide. This is the percent of Somerville Middle School students who reported physical activity for 60+ minutes on at least 5 of the past 7 days. So this chart displays the percentage of middle school students who reported that. In 2019, 48% of middle school students reported engaging in the recommended level of physical activity. This percentage has decreased in 2019, so it was at 50% in 2013, and now it is at 48% in 2019. Male students were more likely than females to report that they engage in physical activity for at least 60 minutes or more, and by grade, reported physical activity was highest among 6th graders at 53%, 44% for 7th graders, and 48% for 8th graders. So that was my best to do it as quickly as possible with a lot of information. If you have any other questions, I can certainly take any questions and get it back to Doug, but I'll do my best to answer what I can.
Well, first, Mr. Mitchell, I want to thank you for this presentation and for doing this work, because in the schools we often talk about the whole child, and health is such a huge part of that, and the partnership between the schools and the city and also our community partnership plays such a key role in that. I'm going to open it up to members for questions. Dr. Ackman and then Dr. Phillips.
So first I want to give snaps to, push that back, to the district. I don't know the slide, but it's on page 8 here that, you know, received instruction talking about substance abuse. That's gone way up. So thank you. I did want to ask through the chair, do you know about the statistical significance of these numbers? And I ask that because specifically the first slide under the violence and safety, the percent of Somerville middle school students who experienced physical violence in the past 12 months, all of those numbers have gone up, but they've gone up by like maybe a percentage point. And so, you know, in data analysis of like, do we know if it's, do you know what I mean when I say statistically significant? And then is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can certainly look into that and get you the information, for sure.
As a follow-up, I would say, if it is, to me, this is, I mean, it speaks to a lot of the violent stuff is, if it's statistically significant. So there's small increases, but it seems problematic to me if they are valid.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Phillips and
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you for this. I think there's a lot of really great news in this data report, some things that are troubling but are consistent with national trends. But I'm wondering if we're still asking the resilience items, and if so, what are the results for that? Does that correlate with what we're seeing here? How are kids feeling supported and engaged in the community?
Sure. It's a good question. I'm not quite sure. I know in the high school version, resiliency is definitely asked. I'm not sure if that's the same for middle school. Sometimes the questions vary depending on age, because some are not age appropriate to ask, but I'll look onto that and I'll get it back to you guys for sure.
thank you. Mr. Green?
So I have 2 questions about, on here it's slide 24, it's the reporting, the students who reported worrying about problems in the past 12 months. In particular, and this is kind of why I asked Kat my question earlier, that increase in people who are concerned about school failure we're seeing it explode at the high school level, not just in Somerville, but nationwide. And so seeing it also at the middle school level suggests that this is something we need to take into consideration. Because that was one of the few things that does leap to mind as being statistically significant, an increase over the last 2 years, is that concern. Did you guys ask any questions about that? Because it's important, I think there's the perception issue and the reality issue, and with worrying out a problem doesn't necessarily mean it is a problem, but it could. So I was just wondering if you guys did any in-depth questions on that front.
I don't think it goes more than what the question itself asked, but it's certainly good feedback I can bring back to our evaluators to dig down deeper if you'd like something.
If I may, the other question about that one, relatedly on the gangs in the community concern, that concern is way down, but when I talk to students anecdotally, their concerns mirror what Dr. Ackman suggested, which is there is greater concern about violence writ large, even if they may not be concerned about gang violence. So I was wondering if you had any questions that got at that particular issue.
Sure. We do ask a question about gang involvement, but I don't know if it goes any further than that.
Superintendent?
Through you, Madam Chair. So your question as to about the grades and the pressure from school, I can say that we did some informal study with the redirect students at Somerville High to try to get at what were some of the stressors, and it was a combination of things. In most cases, it wasn't necessarily not having the academic skill to do the work. It was often not enough time, being over-programmed, outside responsibilities of caretaker that was often pressing them that they then couldn't feel like they could complete it. It also had to do with the how overscheduled in many cases our kids can be, because we keep fitting more and more and more things into the schedule, both at the state level and then as a community, and the schedule can only hold so much. And so there really is very little downtime or time that a student could take to just be able to catch up, take a breath, and be able to review. The expectation is that's all done outside of school, and that isn't realistic for some of our students who may be working or a caretaker. So my hope is, going forward at the high school level, that we address the issue around the balance of advanced placement and honors classes that students are taking, and that we find ways to allow the schedule to provide them with the time they need to work individually, but also collectively, to get some of their work done.
Thank you. Dr. Ackman, you had another question?
I did. Just as a clarifying point, so my understanding is that, marijuana can be consumed through a vape pen as well. Is there like specification in the question that sort of parses it out, or does it just say vape? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I believe in the new version, it's going to parcel it out more. These questions were, since electronic vapor products have been evolving, and since we originally had done this, I think the landscape has changed significantly. So I know for like high school version, it's going to break it down a little bit more to say, if you are consuming marijuana, how are you doing so? And it'll be vape, traditional marijuana smoking, except blunt, something like that. I don't think that it was in this one because of just the landscape has changed.
Superintendent Skipper?
Through you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things that jumped out at me. So one is one that I actually would like Director Doncaster to just address a little bit. We've seen certainly the uptick that I think has been a national uptick, which is around self-harm behaviors. Suicide, thoughts of self-harm. We've seen some of that, and as have we seen increase of hospitalizations for mental health evaluations, safety evaluations. So we actually have tried to be fairly, I think, progressive and proactive in this area, and not wait until it's at a crisis in our school system, but rather try to get supports to young people. So Liz and her team have done a great deal on this. I wanted you to share that.
Yeah, so to Mary's point, that we have brought in a company called the Samaritans, and they have done workshops with our middle school students. These workshops are small group workshops, and they help students sort of understand their self-care and understand the signs in themselves and their friends, how to care for themselves when they're feeling down, or how to care for a friend who maybe something's happening and they've gone a little dark and they've withdrawn a little bit. It gives them the words and the vocabulary to sort of speak to their friends and have a self-care plan for themselves. But what I really liked about this particular program from the Samaritans was that before we did the small group workshops, we did a 2-hour professional development with the teachers. So the teachers were informed on all these practices before the actual workshops happened. So if students came forward with any sort of thoughts after the workshop, the teachers were prepared. So I really liked that piece about it, and students did come forward after the workshops to say they wanted to report about themselves or a friend, and so we had our counselors ready there to meet with the students and to walk them through it and possibly help them and their friends and report to parents if we needed to.
And that was, thank you, Director Doncaster. That was also relative to the 7th and 8th grade, and now we're mapping it back to the 5th and 6th grade, and they also were doing workshops at the high school. So really, that'll be work that we continue to do up at the high school. We put a lot of information out to the student body. We have posters up for who to call if it's the weekend or if it's after hours and students have thoughts that are of concern and they want to talk with somebody. So I think just being able to make this more visible and not a stigma for students when they're struggling with the issues of mental health. We've also, as I've shared with you through the budget process and will again, we have 3 times, we've tripled the amount of embedded therapy for our students here over the last 4 years. And this means partnering deeply with Riverside and Home for Little Wanderers, Cambridge Health Alliance, really all of the partners that we're able to. We're actually looking for additional partners. We don't want wait lists in any of our schools for mental health services for embedded. So this is another avenue for students of support that I think has made a tremendous difference and frankly has led to more students declaring, more students sharing and coming forward saying that they have thoughts and that they need support, where I think if we had not provided that, it more turns toward action. Just statistically, while I'm sure the national trend is maybe more toward females, we actually see it pretty even here, if not a little bit heavier on the male side, particularly in the middle school grades.
Thank you for that. Ms. Patone?
Thank you, Chair Norman. I just have a couple, some of them are comments and some of them are questions. Dr. Ackman pointed out the increase in students getting information from schools, and that is a direct correlation to the revamp of the health ed program a few years ago, which I was incredibly happy about that happening. And just in terms of, I have a student in the middle grades, and my student and her friends actually, I asked them about it and they tell me about it. It's very exciting. And I'm really happy that that's happening. And I'm excited that we're going to be doing the high school this year, revamping that program as well. The other side of that is that, what can we do? I know it's really challenging because it's a bit outside, but how can we enhance the education of parents just on wellness in general? I know that's really challenging. I know that the health department has held some workshops. I've attended some of them. And what kind of consideration of partnering can we do with other events? I know we have particular events that we have high attendance to, whether it's concerts or PTA events, and somehow this one is it's wellness, it's not just substances, and that's this is probably one of the most important things I think to connect with those types of meetings and events, is to have this kind of information available to families. So I'm just going to encourage that. But I had the question was, through Chair Norman to the superintendent, was how do we use this? That was one good example of how we use the information, but how does this information get used by the health educators, by the classroom teachers? How do they get informed about the summary of what we're learning and how they can use this information to inform moving forward?
Through Madam Chair, excellent question. So it gets disseminated. The Assistant Superintendent Mazza will work with his department heads, namely health and phys ed, to be able to look at the results and then determine what, if any, additional curriculum or supports need to be added in. And that includes both the middle and then the high school survey as well. But I also think Director Doncaster's department takes it and looks at it. And with the providers that we work with, such as Cambridge Health Alliance and Riverside and Home for Little Wanderers, it's important for them to see the trends that our students are displaying as ways to continue to work on them. For instance, some of them do social groups. So that would be a perfect example where they could also do parent outreach. SFLC will look at it. So really the idea is to disseminate the information and then to have Health and Human Services as our kind of touchstone in terms of professional guidance, but in terms of our departments to make sure that collectively we're all working toward them. I think the bullying is another good example that, it's wonderful to see the decrease in the school bullying. It's a bit of a whack-a-mole because it sort of has moved now to the outside, and so that causes me concern. So that says that we probably need to do some thinking as a community about what that looks like. Talk with REC, talk with our out-of-school time providers, come up with a safety walk protocol so that if, in fact, students are feeling unsafe or something said to them, they know they can actually bring that back to the school. They can also report it to any one of the outside providers where it may be happening, but really make it much more of a city education. and that includes electronic, which is a major concern of mine. I think the electronic shows up here in a couple of different ways, and I'm the first one to love technology, but I also respect its limits. And there's a couple of pieces in here that I see, one being when we talk about the stresses for young people, definitely identified by young people as when I'm on social media, I feel stressed, I feel everybody knows, I need a certain amount of likes. There's a whole perception that goes with that. Certainly, we see uptick of, violent conversation, disparaging conversation, self-image issues that come up on social media. So I think, one of the things we're hoping to be putting forward to the Rules Committee over the course of the remainder of the year are some screen limit recommendations. Some that have to do with us, particularly with our younger students, and some recommendations for parents in terms of awareness with the phones and with machines. Because I also think it has a correlation with students not having as much physical outlet and physical activity, they're gaming or they're on their devices. And so I think, we have to look at it and say, too much of anything is not a good thing. So I think we're probably at that tipping point with screens.
I would just add to that, the electronic connections also is often in lieu of in person, and our kids are getting more isolated. Ms. Krepchen?
So I was definitely disturbed by the statistics about the self-harm and suicide, as I'm sure we all were. And I just wanted to bring up an organization that I think I mentioned to Mary at some point called the Non Project that I met over the summer at a teen empowerment event. And they provide real-world experience of people who have had issues with self-harm or alcohol abuse, and they will come in and speak to the students. And I know when I talk to them, they started out with just high school, but are now working with middle schools. So I just wanted to bring that up again as a possibility of something we could try out.
Thank you for that information. Superintendent Skipper?
Through you, Madam Chair. So actually, I did talk with Doug Kress about it, and we're looking at that to say, could that be another resource? So we actually, through our TRN teams, that's one of the projects that we would like to think about engaging to train students, also about how to be safety ambassadors to one another. So thank you for that.
Mr. Green?
Thank you. Actually, I guess it's through you to Superintendent, speaking about, and I guess also speaking about the gender issues and our self-harm. This is my third middle school presentation as a member of the school committee. The last two showed their data said that females were more likely to have self-harm than males. We saw that dramatically in last year's high school report. So I would like to see the gender breakdown data of this more specifically. And also, if it is true that the schools are reporting actually seeing more incidents on the male side, and that differs from what the report is saying, that to me suggests that for all the investment we've made in mental health, which is actually I think I'm proudest of in my time in school committee, is the investments we've made in mental health services these last 4 years, that it's not getting to all the young women who need it. And so I'd like to think about, as a body, what could we be doing more and better to get the services to the young women who aren't showing up on the school reports but are reporting in the data to the survey.
Through you, Madam Chair. So this is one that's really close to my heart. So I think that what we have going here is something really healthy, which is that our young men actually feel that they can come forward. And I don't necessarily think that there's more with young women than there are young men. I just think it's a reporting issue. I also think young men display self-harm behavior differently than young women. That's been my experience. And so a young man often with self-harm can externalize, and it can be just as harmful, but we label them as bad behavior, violent, assaultive, and that can be a cry for help just as much. So I think our goal is to really push through all of that and really go to the individual student. And this is why I say 3 times the amount of embedded counseling, really, really a positive thing for our kids. The fact that they feel comfortable coming to the adults in the building and to their counselors, which is where a lot gets reported, tremendously positive thing. So these are the things that we want to continue to work on. Again, I want no wait list. There's certain things we don't want, never want a wait list for mental health for our young people.
I had a question. Excuse me, is that the number of students reporting that a close friend or family member had died is close to 40%. And I was wondering, in the asking of the question, could the same death be a number of students recording it? I'm thinking when we've had it over the last couple of years, a number of students die, and some very all beloved. So I would expect that there'd be an uptick. So is it possible that that number is so high because it's kids reporting the same same death?
Sure, yeah. The way that the question is phrased is it's during the last 12 months did these things happen to you? And then the third one is see a member or of your family had an alcohol, oh, sorry, I'm sorry. A family member or close friend died, which is G. So it's very possible, yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions, comments? Again, thank you for doing this work, from coming to us every year, 1 year with the middle school, 1 with the high school. It speaks well to the partnerships between the city and the schools that we see numbers often trending in the right direction or holding steady, but that student mental health and physical health is such a priority, and that there's a real partnership across the city. So thank you again for coming, and thank you, Director Doncaster, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go back in order up to item number 4, the report of the superintendent, starting with the district report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you'll see several things included in the packet. The first is a calendar. I want to give a big thank you to our own Catherine for all of her hard work on this, fitting as much as possible into a very small amount of space. But I think at this point, I thank everyone for their feedback. I think what we have is a calendar that's much more reflective of our community and more informative. And so we've added in, as you can see in the greens, some of the suggestions of holidays that had previously been included and left off, now re-included. We also made the notation that for Jewish and Islamic holidays, that the star indicates that it begins on sundown of the previous day. We also color-coded those. So again, any further comments, I would just, this is the second reading, is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. Any further ones, I would just suggest to Ms. Santiago, and she will take it up from there.
Are there any comments, Dr. Ackman?
I just had a point of clarification, and I think I know the answer, but on important dates, it says December 23rd, begin winter recess. Does that mean at the close of that business day, because it's not highlighted on the calendar? Does that make sense?
That is correct.
So that means, so it's a full business day, the 23rd?
It is a full business day.
Okay.
That is right. That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay, and it is supposed to say 23rd, begin winter recess, not 24th?
Yes, that's correct.
Typically how we do it? Okay, thank
That
you
is
so much.
correct. That mirrors last year.
Are there any other comments? Ms. Patone, yes.
I just had one particular question. I'm not familiar with all these holidays, which is not surprising because I don't, but I was curious why certain ones were put on the list and not others. I don't, I tried to do some research, and I tried to research, what were these holidays that came up from SFLC through families?
Yes.
And that's why they were identified?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes. Excellent question. We did another review with SFLC, as we do each year. What SFLC will do is look at our population, our community. They'll then look at the surrounding communities to see if there may be something that we've left off or something we haven't considered. And so this was their best thinking at the time. I believe we also had a bit of input from some school committee members as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. I can't remember, because the early release days for the high school are not the same ones, and that they get determined later, and they usually are added later on. Okay, because
The digital.
to the digital. Thank you. It is so helpful to know when those days are. Thank you. Mr. Green.
First, I want to actually thank the district for including Dia de los Reyes. I know that is of particular interest to many of our Latino community, particularly our Puerto Rican community. And with that, I move to approve the 2021 calendar.
Second.
There is a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Is there any further discussion on the 2021 calendar. Ms. Patone?
Yes, I just was curious, were the green highlights just for us, or they're not part of the actual calendar?
No, we don't print it in the color.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of accepting the 2020-21 calendar, please signal by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? It is unanimously passed. Thank you so much for that. Superintendent Skipper, your next item, report out of the school committee goals from 2016.
Yes, so
2019.
a big shout out to our own Dr. Curley for assembling. Ms. Patone had asked the question, could we get a report out of, what were some of the milestones of success relative to the 2016-2019 period goals? And I think in a really nice way, we were able to go back and synthesize. Dr. Curley took a big lead on this. There's so much that we could include, but what we tried to do is pick the gems. To Ms. Patone's point, which I think is excellent, this isn't something nice that we can put up on the website. It can be historical and start the precedent so that as we complete our three-year goal cycle, we can always have the report of all of the data that goes along. As you also remember, as part of my evaluation, we generally do a review of the goals as well. So there's multiple opportunities to look at it. But I do think this is a nice synthesis of what we accomplished from 2016 to 2019. And certainly not done, building on, but I think a good moment in time.
I would just like to say, on behalf of the school committee, thank you to the staff who have helped us develop good, ambitious yet also measured goals over the years, and that you can see improvement both in classrooms but across schools and across the district from this work. So thank you very much for that.
Through you, Madam Chair. Although I can't release yet because it's still embargoed a couple of the data points, but I would like to say that one of the things that I'm incredibly proud about for Somerville High School and its staff is the amazing work it's done both on increasing of APs, increasing access for all students, particularly underserved students for APs, but also for dropout and graduation rate. We have made substantial gains in 5 years, lowering the dropout rate to the all-time low, increasing the graduation rate to all-time high. And I will just give you a sneak preview, but I will say that we did beat it again this year. Can't say what it is, let you know that as soon as it becomes unembargoed, but it will beat and be the new lowest and best. So very, very proud of their work.
Bravo. Next item is the personnel report.
Thank you. There's a few educators that are retiring that we would like to thank. For the Brown Community Schools program as a part-time assistant teacher, Fernanda O'Brien, who has given us 17 years of service between community schools and the Brown. At the Capuano as a SMILE teacher, Joan Prisby, who has given us 33 years of fine service. At East Community School, East Somerville Community School, the assistant principal, Laura Bonnell, who's given us 28 years of fine work. At Somerville High School, the resource room teacher, Joan Shea, 30 years of fine work. At the Kennedy School, 2 retirements, grade 1 teacher, Catherine Hughes, 24 years. And topping it out, grade 2 teacher at the Kennedy, Deborah Hurley, for 35 amazing years of service. For all of these educators and for the generations of children in Somerville that they have taught and the families they've impacted, we thank them so much.
And the superintendent's report?
I'm just on a roll here. So just a few things of note. Again, we last week at the last school committee, I gave a thank you to the Medford Malden Elks, and I just want to once again thank them for the longstanding generosity where every single third grader in our district has a dictionary that they get to keep and use as a resource at both school and home. This is just a wonderful example of long-term partnership with them. On the 17th, the representatives from the Elks went to the Brown School to distribute the dictionaries and drop off the remaining dictionaries to all other third graders in the district. We really appreciate their generosity, but also just the personal connection that they continue to make with our staff and students. We also want to thank Shape Up Somerville. Massachusetts Safe Routes to School, and the Somerville Police Department, all three fine partners of ours, for working with us and providing every single second grader in our district with pedestrian safety training. This is such an essential training to help our students know how to navigate sidewalks, crossing the street. The lessons kicked off, and in the next couple of weeks, these entities will join us in visiting every second grade classroom in the district to talk with students about how they can safely walk to school, use a crosswalk, and stay safe in a parking lot. The trainings will wrap up just in time for schools to celebrate the Winter Walk and Roll to School Day, which is scheduled for February 5th. So again, we want to thank our partners. Just in terms of upcoming 2021, we have all 8th grade students in the district and their families will be at the Somerville High School Course Planning Night, which will take place Thursday, January 30th. Students and families will have an opportunity to learn about the high school course selection process and to meet their student's future high school counselor. Interpretation will be provided, and the event will be in the auditorium. We also are hosting our open houses on Thursday and Friday, February 6th and 7th at Somerville High School. All are welcome to come by and get a firsthand look at the outstanding teaching and learning that takes place at Somerville High every day. Guests will have an opportunity to visit classrooms. It will look slightly different next year. Meet educators and other staff and hear about the Somerville High School experience from students themselves. There's 2 sessions, a morning session, 8:15 to 10, afternoon session, 12:15 to 2. No advance registration is required, and the sessions will begin promptly at the start time. We also will be hosting on Thursday, February 6th from 5:30 to 7:30. We'll be collaborating with the Cambridge Public Schools OSS Transition Services through our Special Education Department Road to the Future Transition Fair. This is the first time we will be doing it with another district. This is for families of middle and high school students with disabilities. The fair this year will take place in the main cafeteria of Cambridge Ridge and Latin, which is located at 459 Broadway in Cambridge. There, families can learn about agencies and services that may be helpful to their college or workforce-bound child, educational, employment, and independent living options and opportunities, as well as network and family support opportunities. Our Somerville families planning to attend are asked to RSVP to Brittany Corrier, who can be found within the Special Education Office, or Sandra Kopman. That information is on the website. Next year, we will be happy to host in our new building. And finally, new registration is off to a great start. As of Friday morning, we were showing an increase in both pre-K and kindergarten registrations compared to this time the previous 3 years. As of right now, 132 pre-K and 249, and even that has changed because I looked before I came, have been completed. And in this year, what's really nice is you can see all of the families that have done a pre-submittal, so they haven't completed it yet, but they're still working on it. So it gives us a much better sense of numbers. So we're very, very, very thankful, and it seems like people like the system, and the enrollment center is doing a great job with helping families as they walk in. That concludes my report.
I had one question. A parent contacted me. For the open house hours during the school day, are students, 8th grade students, allowed to go visit with their parents?
Through Madam Chair, as long as they're with the parents, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Ackman.
To that last point that you made, I've heard from some constituents who are very concerned about after school for they're new to the district, and they felt that they had not, that they had not received adequate communication specifically around that. Can you speak to, are there changes being made around there? Like, does that make sense?
Through Madam Chair, so just to clarify, is this specific to what they will have available to them for the out-of-school time?
Correct. In the fall?
What incoming preschool or kindergartners will have available to them for out-of-school time in the fall? And I mean, I think it's, my understanding is it's due to hearsay from families who have not had great experiences in the past, but that there's a certain amount of anxiety and they feel they have not been adequately presented with what their options may be. Does that make sense?
It does, through you, Madam Chair. So as part of the online system, parents are asked whether they would like to opt and are interested in after-school care through community schools. And so right now, there's the same, I get the same numbers for who is choosing which sites. Our plan is to staff according to that demand. We did not have wait lists. We exhausted the wait list last year, and the commitment from community schools was to continue to expand so that all children could be served. I think what's a little unusual for them is that typically they would find out right away, and what we're doing instead is marrying it to the process so that they are actually getting their assignment and their assignment to the after school at the same time. But they can always call the community schools office if they have any questions.
Okay, so through the chair, that's good. Does the SFLC know to direct them to the community schools office?
3 months yet, they do.
Okay, thank you. It's been incredibly helpful.
I just wanted to shout out to Special Ed Director Christine Trevisoni. This transition fair is huge, and to do it with another city is also huge. If people don't know, special ed education students either graduate or age out at age 22, and for those who are continuing on and who may need to know what options are or services, it has been described to me as falling off a cliff, so that we are having, it goes to this whole concept of how do we prepare our students for post-secondary success. I think this is an important addition to the menu of options. So I will be attending. I'm very excited, and actually I know a whole lot of parents who are saying this is amazing. So thank you for that. We are now moving on to the report of the subcommittees. The first item is school committee meeting for rules management. Ms. Patone, do you have that?
Yes, I do, Ms. Norman.
Thank you so much.
So this is the Rules Management Subcommittee from December 16th, 2019. The agenda was the homework policy update, the Corey policy for Somerville Public Schools volunteers, and discussion of future rules agenda items, memo, and other ideas. Meeting was chaired by Ms. Palmer, school committee members Laura Patone and Carrie Norman were in attendance, Chief of Staff Jeff Curley as well. There are 14 members in the audience, including Somerville Family Learning Collaborative Leadership, staff, parents, and STA Representative Megan Brady. The homework policy update was just brief in saying we're still on schedule with the focus groups and that we're looking forward to hearing the full report in the new year. The Corey policy for Somerville Public Schools volunteers. So in an effort to increase parent and guardian accessibility to volunteer opportunities and maintain student safety at the schools, the background check policy is being reconsidered. Several members of the newly formed LPAC, which is the English Learner Parent Advisory Council that was established last year, and district staff attended the meeting and spoke in favor of broadening the options for background checks, speaking to stories of individuals being excluded from volunteering or attending field trips due to lack of specific documentation necessary for a CORI. A CORI is a criminal offender record information. It's a record of all criminal court appearances in Massachusetts for a particular individual, including arrests, convictions, dismissals, and serious violations. And creating that balance, making sure our students are safe, but that we're inclusive and opportunities to participate in their students' educational experiences are provided to families. There was a draft update provided by administration proposing expanding the type of identification documentation considered beyond a Massachusetts identification, such as a passport or birth certificate issued by a non-U.S. government entity, as well as providing discretion to administration based on prior knowledge and experience with the person. Additionally, the draft further specified that discretion will be given to the administrator in a case where there is no direct and unmonitored contact between the parent guardian and any student, assuming that the parent guardian is under the direct supervision of a staff member. Specifically, the volunteer would not be with any students without the presence and supervision of staff. We discussed the draft and look for further clarification from administration and legal counseling to be shared at a future meeting. It's on the agenda tonight because the Rules Committee met in January and brought it forward. I still have some questions about it, so we'll discuss that later. And then we had a nice conversation about rules, future possible agenda items that were put on the table in a memo just provided by Ms. Palmer. Some of the topics proposed were the homework policy, although we've done some K-based focus groups that we're supposed to get feedback from, but also considering the high school homework policy, life-threatening allergies, the online policy platform update, as well as how to increase awareness and access to those policies, harassment policies and policy considerations to the sexual health curriculum, specifically teaching consent. Out of school time, recess policy, recycling, school start time, especially high school, SNAP access, electronic messaging policy to include social media, compliance with the annual report requirement and student handbook review by school committee, considering a new trauma-informed, healing-centered engagement policy, school-based rewards and punishments, a review of the potentially outdated language throughout the policies and include committees and positions that are not operational or deciding to comply with what's in the policies right now for subcommittees and support committees. So thanks to the chair, Palmer, for the comprehensive review and documentation of potential future agenda items, and I hope that the current Rules Committee had an opportunity to review that and make plans with that. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
A motion to accept the report from the Rules Subcommittee on December 16th, 2019.
There's a motion by Ms. Batone, seconded by Mr. Green. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The report is accepted. Thank you for pinch hitting there, Ms. Batone, during the turnover of a school committee. We will now jump up to item number 6, new business. We did the youth report. The next item is the Somerville Public School Policy Manual, and the following policy is being presented this evening for the first reading. File ADDA, background checks. Would someone like to do a reading or?
Move to waive the reading of policy ADDA.
Second. Yeah, I'm happy to explain it, but it is pretty long.
Can you do explain it, but also perhaps read, the policy is wholly for the most part, staying intact. Could you just read the new part? I believe it's in red or underlined or somehow indicated.
Yep, there we go. Per what Ms. Patone just mentioned, the change to this policy is with the goal of people who cannot conduct a query check, who still want to volunteer in their children's schools. My understanding is with consultation with our attorneys, this is the furthest we felt we could go and still be on solid legal ground. So I will now read the amended section. Let's start with the piece that's already there. Pursuant to a Department of Education regulation, direct and unmonitored contact with children means contact with students when no other employee for whom the employer has made a suitability determination of the school or district is present. This is now the new piece. This means, for example, that a parent or family member known to the school employees may volunteer to provide chaperone services in their students' school or on school-sponsored field trips on which their child is to participate when the field trip is supervised by an employee of Somerville Public Schools, and that such volunteer services does not constitute direct and unmonitored contact. There's quotes there, hence my air quotes. Within the meaning of query regulations. The building administrator shall retain the authority to decline an offer of volunteer chaperone services when, in his or her judgment, a suitability determination cannot be made. I'm now going to jump down to the second new piece. I'll start with the previous wording. In accordance with state law, all current and prospective employees, volunteers, and persons regularly provided school-related transportation to children in the school district shall sign an acknowledgement form authorizing receipt by the district of all available query data from the Department of Criminal Justice and Information Services. The new part is, in reviewing personal identification of potential volunteers, Somerville Public Schools may consider, in addition to the U.S. or Commonwealth of Massachusetts government-issued identification documents, documents such as a passport or birth certificate issued by a non-U.S. government entity. In the absence of the availability of such non-U.S. documents, Somerville Public Schools may, but shall not be required to, consider whether the potential volunteer is a parent or guardian of a current student and is personally known to the teacher or administrator, in which case the teacher or administrator shall verify in writing the length of time they have known the individual, the manner in which they have come to know them, and the frequency of contact they or other school employees have had with the individual, and, as applicable, the applicant's previous experience providing services or participating in Somerville Public Schools activities. So those are the new portions, and if there are questions, I will try and answer them.
Mr. Green and then Ms. Patone?
I want to start by thanking the LPAC, the administration, and my colleagues on the rules. I know that 2 years ago we revisited we had to revisit this policy, and the answer from council at the time was there was nothing we could do. So I really want to thank all the players for not taking no for an answer and finding whatever wiggle room they could find to make a policy that is more inclusive. And I look forward to voting for it.
Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair Norman, to the superintendent. We had seen this in December, and there was some level of confusion for me. In the first paragraph that has the edit, so pursuant to Department of Education regulation, so that's a definition of direct and unmonitored contact, correct? So we start out with that, but then it says this means, for example, and it goes to discuss if there is no direct contact, then we can, decide to basically not have a query. Is that correct? Or that's what I'm confused about.
Through Madam Chair, no, we would still run the query. The issue with the query is that you need a birth date, an address, and a name. And generally how you ensure that those are correct is currently through a state-issued ID. What we're looking to do here is to open up how somebody may show themselves through something else, such as a passport or birth certificate. But we would still use that information to run the query.
Okay, so
Do you have a follow-up?
yeah, is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so to further clarify, you're saying that for all volunteers, we will do a query, we just will use different information, not necessarily a...
Correct. Correct. In the cases where we're running using something other than a state-issued, that's where we would have the person do something in a non-contact. So basically be a chaperone for their child, but not necessarily count toward our ratio of field trip.
I apologize, you're saying that in the event that we couldn't do the query, that we would do that?
No, in the event that we're using something other than state-issued. Because, for instance, a query is only in the purview of the state. So it doesn't really give us any data outside, like international data. It doesn't give us any national data. With employees, it's different. We do fingerprint. So for the purposes here, if we're running it on just a general state-issued, and it meets one of the types of documentation that are currently requested for a query, then as long as nothing comes up in the query, the person's able to chaperone and do what they normally do. If we're using an alternative to verify the information, we would run the query, providing nothing comes up. We would then allow the person to be able to attend the field trip but not be in charge of other students, just their own child, or same with volunteer in a non-contact situation.
Okay, I understand that, but when I read this policy, that's not what I understand.
Okay.
I think it's cryptic and confusing, and I would like to make a request that it gets, I'm happy to work with whomever on it, but I feel like, maybe the members of the committee didn't find it confusing, but like I said, I was on the previous committee, I found it super confusing, and maybe we probably didn't give very good direction, and so I'm happy to help, but if other people disagree.
So we are not voting on it tonight. Our next meeting would be the second reading, and typically we have 2 public readings for this very reason, that questions, amendments, and feedback from the public can be considered. So I would encourage you to come to the next meeting with amendment language, and if it's extensive, to possibly get it to us so we can put it in the packet. Superintendent?
Through Madam Chair, if you could actually get it to Dr. Curley,
Yeah.
I think we can just streamline it.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm not sure we need the 2 full paragraphs now
Yeah.
that I'm reading this. I think we can condense it and be a little bit more specific to step A, step B.
I think it's just an organization of information. I think
Yep.
that the legal tried to simplify it, but it actually made it more confusing.
Sure, got
to
it.
me.
And I will give Dr. Curley a heads up that it's coming.
Thank you for that perspective. Dr. Phillips?
Yeah, I was actually wondering if the process should actually be that Dr. Curley and the superintendent bring a revision to rules for feedback, because it sounds like the process that you just laid out verbally is not the process in here at all. And unless you were taking really great notes, which I think you probably were, it would be hard to come back and try to replicate that.
Sure, we can do that. I'll talk to Dr. Curley.
Is that, are you comfortable with that?
No, that's fine. I mean, I will send an email just to say this is how I'm confused, just so they have more information to work on, but that would be great if they could propose a change, and if you want to send it back to rules, that's fine with me.
I don't know that. As Chair of Rules, Dr. Ackman, would you be willing to reconsider it? Or what I would hope is that this would be something we could clarify at the next meeting in an amendment. So let's give that a shot. Let's have you and Dr. Curley work on some of the language, and hopefully we can pass it in the next. If we find that we are going in a very different direction, we will then send it back to rules. Does that? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Our next item of business, so is the 2020 projected subcommittee agenda topics for finance, rules, and educational programs. I put that on this year because I think it's important, one, to map out the work as best we can, but for all of us to have some idea what's happening in the subcommittees before they come up to us. These are proposed agendas. Chairs can adjust them over the course of the year as things come up. So let's just go right down the line. Mr. Green, Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With the caveat that finance is meeting for the first time this year on Wednesday, so I have not had a chance to vet this with my colleagues. But I think our agenda is pretty much set. Obviously, we're going to spend the first half of the year preparing the budget for fiscal year 2021. We're also already wading deep into student-based budgeting, and I expect that will be coming. Some things will be coming out of that work to finance for discussion at the school committee level. Additionally, as was mentioned at our last meeting, some work will be done trying to get our hands around issues of revolving accounts and fundraising and other forms of income handled at a school level. And if we get through those 3 things this year, that will be a very big and busy year, and I'm sure other things will come up.
Thank you very much for that. We will now go to Dr. Ackman as Chair of Rules.
So we discussed potential future agenda items, as Ms. Patone mentioned. The previous chair left us with quite a laundry list of potential amazing opportunities. So per suggestion from other members of the subcommittee, and the suggestion was that Dr. Curley and I are going to meet to discuss an agenda, but with, and this is what was suggested by my colleagues, with the eye on our 2019 to 2022 school committee goals around equity. So that will be the lens with which we prioritize our agenda items.
Thank you very much for that. And finally, Educational Programs Chair, Ms. Patone.
Thank you, Chair Norman. We just met today, so I will do my best to reflect. There's been a shift in the school improvement plan, so half of the schools are going to present at regular, half of them are going to provide memos that we're going to discuss in ed programs. Some topics that we have tentatively put in for this year are X-Block. So we discussed X-Block a little bit last year. X-Block was introduced about 6 years ago as a new innovation, and this is just a reflection and assessment on how we're doing with X-Block. Is it serving our needs as we intended them, or are they serving different needs? So we're excited about that. We're going to be looking at the handbooks. So Assistant Superintendent Mazza has already started to assess what handbooks we do have for students, and we're going to kind of look at the current state and actually pursue our school committee approval of handbooks. That is something that we're obligated to do. So that's part of our work. A health program, education program update. So the high school health education program is being re-looked at this year, so we're going to get an update from that group. Alternative assessments and the whole school quality work that we've been working on for a long time. And so one of the things we're going to be looking at is there's several different vehicles that are currently used right now to do alternative assessments and getting a better understanding of what things we may want to be making public in the future, although this is obviously being dictated through the work by the MEICA, but getting our input on that. Updates on the envisioning the future of the high school, updates on standard updates on course catalog. We want to integrate over the next 2 years general curriculum updates. So how are we looking at, ELA, history, science, and figuring out over the next 2 years, can we litter these in over a few months? So we're touching one, and the idea is to hit each one every 2 or 3 years. So we won't overburden them, but at the same time, I think it's a really great opportunity to get visibility on the curriculum work, the great curriculum work that's happening in the district. We had a couple other things, cultural behavior management, civics education. So there's a new mandate about civics education in our schools and getting an update of what the schools are planning to do with that. And there's many more things, but our goal next meeting is to prioritize these because there are a lot that we would like to do. And we also recognize that anything that we bring up in an update generally involves work. So there's a little bit of work to do the update, but then out of the update usually comes some recommendation or a plan to assess something or do something a little bit more in detail. And it's very important that we as a school committee, we want to have accountability, but at the same time we don't want to overburden our administration. So that's going to be the work between now and our February meeting. So it was a great meeting today, and I want to thank everybody. And if anybody has any suggestions of topics that they're interested in, let me know.
Well, I want to thank all three of you for giving us a window into what's coming this year. Those 3 subcommittees is in addition to the work that is happening here, plus the 3 task force, as Mr. Green referenced, the weighted student formula. Ms. Batone is chairing a task force on looking at student enrollment, and I'm chairing a task force on human capital. So there is all kinds of work being done on all different fronts. Ms. Batone.
I just want to thank you, Chair Norman, to set the expectation for us as a body that we do this reflection every year, and I hope that this gets put into our annual agenda, that we have this sort of touch base where we share what we're planning on doing every year. So it's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Ackman?
Chair Norman.
Thank you. From time to time, I'd just like to do a little update on Somerville is part of the Shore Educational Collaborative. We are one of 7 or 8 members. So I want people to know what it is that we're doing because it's, the work is in the district and extends beyond. So Shore Educational Collaborative offers special education and day services for behaviorally and academic challenged students and adults. The collaborative also offers consultation, professional development, and operational services to educators and school administrators. Each year, the collaborative serves more than 150 students and 300 adults. So Somerville, we tend to send on average from 4 to 10 students a year, although I see it as a monthly total number, so it might be a little different. And it seems like most often for 45-day evaluations. Students and adults receive individual attention to help them reintegrate into traditional school environments and participate productively in their communities. Each member district has 1 vote on the board of directors, and we meet every 2nd Tuesday of the month during the school year. So this fall, the Shore opened a new adult services facility, moving adult clients from the building previously shared with students. And what's so exciting about this for our students, this allows for the expansion of current student services and the creation of more classrooms. And Shore is still in the planning phase, but the intention is increasing the number of younger classrooms and potentially a dedicated autism pre-K in response to increasing demand. So I think they're seeing a lot of the same demands and needs that we are in the district. And then finally, the Shore is it's a very well-run organization. In December, an independent auditor gave Shore the highest rating as she has done for the last several years. So I just want to know, you all to know, when we're sending students and there's money being invested in it, where it goes. And so that concludes my update from the Shore.
Okay, and this is not a report that we moved to?
It is not.
Okay, any questions? Solid.
So I think it's in the Shore bylaws that we report out periodically. So thank you for that. The next is item number E, physical education classes versus athletics. We received a letter from a student, or Ms. Batone did, and she shared it with the committee. Ms. Batone, would you like to introduce this topic?
Sure. A thoughtful student sent a letter, identifying the pressure involved with being a student athlete, and that it's very time consuming to be doing practices every day, and it actually impedes some students from participating in athletics. And that was her kind of premise. And she wanted the district to consider it was a combination of two different perspectives. One is that the students wouldn't necessarily have to take physical education, and in lieu of physical education, to have a study hall specific for athletics students who are doing these programs. And so I wanted to, the idea of waiving or possibly waiving PA requirements is something that's always been on my mind for our athletics students who really put in hours and hours and hours and do have direct instruction from their coaches, which is part of the requirements. But right now in our school committee policy, we do require every student has 2 half-year courses. So, a whole year worth of PE in different times over the year. So anyway, I just want to introduce that, and I'm glad that the district want to look into this. Thank you.
Superintendent, would you like to speak to this?
Sure, Madam Chair. So actually, it's state mandated. But that said, I think this is something we want to look into. We're looking to partner with something called Boston Scholar Athletes, and part of why we've put it off is because of the facility, because you need a room. But really, the thinking behind it is that there's a zone, an athlete zone, where students can do just that. They can go, there's a full-time person, they can actually get help with their with their academics, but coaches can use it and go in during the day. It really is sort of what this young woman talks about, creating that community for athletes. I think on top of that, we do want to look at, we haven't been able to find too many districts that are doing this, but to look at what would be the scenario whereby some of a student's physical education could either be waived or replaced by the activities that they're participating in after school in an MIA sport. So it is, our athletes work hard. They certainly come away much more, for any of us that played sports, certainly much more aware of time management. But that said, when you're going through it, it doesn't feel like such a great lesson. And they put in a lot of time, on the field and then off-season in conditioning. And so finding a way to be able to value that beyond just the sports season, I think will be one we want to look toward. This fits in nicely in the sense of the education program at the high school as we're sort of revamping this to do something very different. So the out-of-school time experience is very similar, which is how can we give credit to students for what they're doing outside of school, inside of school. So I see this as very much along the same lines. It will take us a little bit of time, and we want to do it in conjunction with the high school committee that's working on this. But I applaud the student for bringing it up because I think frankly, it's a good idea that we want to pursue and see what we can come away with.
Mayor Curtatone?
Thank you. I want to commend the member for bringing it forward and for the superintendent and team for looking at this as the parent of 2 high school athletes and 4 young boys were involved, and a coach, high school coach for almost 30 years in various sports, boys and girls. The shape of high school athletics, the status that has evolved and changed men and women, boys and girl athletes do an incredible amount of training, not just within their substantive sport, but in terms of off-season, summer, and during the school year. And remember the purpose of physical education. I remember growing up as a kid, and it was to promote health, well-being, and physical activity. So our kids would grow up healthy and happy and healthy and productive. But there's such a focus on kids in performing scholastic sports. The amount of work they put in there certainly surpasses what they can get out of a PE class. I'm not saying there's not any benefits there certainly is, but it should be more of a supplement to what kids have. So I'm glad we're going to take a look at this, because I believe, we put so much on our students now. There's so many mandates and regulations, and so many things they don't get to do, and then they don't get any downtime either, just to decompress. So I commend the district for taking a look at it. Thank you.
Mr. Green and then Ms. Patone?
I have two comments, one about the substance of the matter before us, and the other one about procedure. Substantively, as many of you know, I grew up in Louisiana, a state that, shall we say, has a certain premium on high school athletics in a way that perhaps other states do not. And one of the ways they addressed this issue, and I don't know if Massachusetts state law would allow us to do it, was actually they went about it the other way. It was not uncommon to have PE classes that were basically practice for those sports. So like the class was taught by the football coach, and all the people in the PE class were football players, and so coincidentally they were able to do certain things that would not have otherwise been possible. So I would say if Massachusetts state law allows, and I know Massachusetts state law on physical requirements, it's really weird really quickly, but that may be a way of approaching it as well. And as far as procedurally, I really appreciate that this letter to the school committee was put in the packet, and I would like us to explore more systematically doing that with correspondences that we get as a body, both as a transparency mechanism so that the correspondences we get become entered in the public record, and also as a way of making it clear how those correspondences affect our agendas.
Thank you for both of those comments. Ms. Patone?
Thank you. Sometimes it can be challenging for school committee members to kind of bring something new in, particularly one from a student, and can kind of ask you guys to do more work, so I really appreciate taking the time to do this. Would my feedback to the student be this is something that is going to be looked into, and probably we might get some feedback in the fall based on the schedule for the high school work?
Superintendent?
Through Madam Chair, I think that this is something that Assistant Superintendent Mazza can bring to the education program committee meetings and bring it up, much like we would be thinking about the out-of-school time. We now have an out-of-school time coordinator that's developing those experiences. I think this is where that conversation will sort of start. I also think we have a little bit of field work to do relative to DESE, relative to reaching out to the couple of districts that we've been able to identify are doing something like this. So, my hope is that going into the spring, we have more answers relative to, is it possible? If it is, what are the limits to it? And then what is it that we would have to work out to include it in program of study and bring to you for approval the following year?
Thank you. Ms. Barish.
I just wanted to speak to something that grabbed my attention when I was reading this, and it's the 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. I mean, these are students. They're student athletes, but they're students first, and 18 hours a week seems like a lot to me. And I just wanted to encourage the administration to look into that and just find out if that is specific to soccer, if that's what we're seeing across the board for all athletes, and whether there are any appropriate ways to regulate that.
Mm-hmm. Superintendent?
Through Madam Chair. So that also caught my eye as well. And I will talk to the athletic director and just ask if we can sort of survey. I'm not sure if this is time intensive during a certain period of time, if this could be a combination of training as well as the actual practices. So I think we need to find out a little bit more about what is consistent across the various sports. In some of them, it has to do with when they can get courts, when they can get fields, when they can get rinks. So they may be doing some consolidation of practices. But it also caught my eye, and I intend to follow up with him.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
I just had one more thing to add, which is that obviously as we look at going down the track for athletics, we should be mindful of the other forms of time-intensive extracurricular activities our students are doing and making sure that we are treating all of those things with parity with our athletic program.
I would like to echo that. What leaps out to me is what about our students who work, our students who have family responsibilities, what kind of balance? I would also urge whoever is looking into this to very much engage the students in this, because I would say, as a parent of a 3-season athlete, there is a wide range of what students want. While the student is very well spoken, it does not broadly, it may not, and that the importance of having our students participate and even come up to school committee would be a very important part of this discussion. But it's also, I would think it would be something we would also need to negotiate. It's not something we can unilaterally enforce. So I just want everyone to understand it is right to discuss it, but there are many different variables in play here. So thank you for bringing that forward, Ms. Patel. Any other comments on this? All right. Now moving on to acceptance of donations.
I move to accept with gratitude a donation from Amy Bond of Cambridge of $1,000 for the Somerville High School Puerto Rico trip.
Second.
There is a motion by Dr. Ackman, seconded by Mr. Green. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you so much for supporting our student off-site learning. Are there any items from board members? Ms. Barish.
I would like to ask the administration to look into the feasibility of establishing a SNAP outreach center within the district to help families with enrollment and verification and resolving any issues that might come up related to SNAP.
Thank you for bringing up the very important food needs and food insecurities of our families. So we look forward to hearing back in the future. Dr. Ackman?
Just to build on that, and Ms. Barish probably knows more about it than I do, so correct me if I'm wrong, but part of the interest in that is that there is funding available, so it wouldn't come out of our coffers, which I think is an important, it's not just that it's something that is right for us to do, it's that there's money available from the state.
My understanding is that there may be, that there is an infrastructure in place for this. I don't know exactly the details about funding.
Superintendent Skipper.
Through you, Madam Chair. I think I will also involve Doug Kress. I'm always conscious of where things are best situated for support. And so it seems to me like this may be a Health and Human Services as opposed to the district. But we will go back, we'll talk with one another to figure that out.
Thank you. Are there other items? Ms. Krepchen?
Thank you. I had an item, excuse me, that I wanted to bring up in rules, and I had already emailed the chair about it, but I wanted to bring it up here as well. I heard from a few constituents with some concerns about bias concerning natural hair for African American students, and I know that this is a policy that has come up in a lot of different places, so I just suggested that be brought up in rules.
Thank you. And you've already discussed it with Dr. Ackman? Fantastic. Any other new items from board members, questions? Ms. Krepchen.
I received a letter from a student with some concerns about the bathrooms at the new high school, and so I wasn't quite sure how best to bring that up.
Superintendent Skipper, can you speak to this?
Through Madam Chair. So Dr. Curley has scheduled a meeting, my understanding is with Ms. Post, and I think it may be with a few students as well, to talk about, I'm assuming this is the transgender bathrooms, unisex. And so I think what I suggested was that we meet first so that we make sure we're clear on what the actual issues are. Our policy currently says that students are able, students who are a non-binary transgender are able to use the bathroom that they associate with. And that will hold true. That is different than having mixed-use bathrooms. And I'm hearing lots of different conversations back and forth. So I've said, I think it's good to do a timeout. Let's sit and talk first, because at this point, the physical construction of the bathrooms are already mapped out and planned. If it's signage and usage policy, that's different. But the physical bathrooms are mapped out. And there was a process that has happened for the last couple of years in which at the high school, GSA and several adults were involved in sort of seeking out their thinking on it. So I just want to make sure we're talking about, I want to make sure what we're talking about in order to come up with a solution. So I think our next step is, I believe Dr. Curley has a meeting on Tuesday of next week, I want to say. And then we can go a step after that once I actually know what the specific issue is.
And correct me if I'm wrong, would that go to the high school building committee at this point? This is not...
Through Madam Chair, I mean, we did bring it up at the building committee, and there isn't a way to change the current plan because that plan reflects 3 years of planning. I think if it comes down to signage and usage policy, that's different. And I think that's where we have to have a conversation about what that looks like and what that means. There are, on each of the floors, singleton bathrooms that are unisex bathrooms, and those were built in from the start. And that was, information or opinion was solicited about that. So I think we all thought that that was sufficient. It sounds like there's been a couple of people that have met since then that are voicing, including a few of the students, that they want something different. And so this is why we need to meet to understand what that is.
Ms. Krupchen.
So who is Jeff meeting with on Tuesday?
My understanding is he is meeting with Julia Post and a few of the GSA members.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have a hand up for new items? No. Thank you for bringing that up. We are now on to condolences. Dr. Ackman?
The Somerville School Committee would like to extend condolences to the family of Kathy Kanan, a retired Somerville High School teacher.
We are adjourned.